Flag of our nation. It's behind me here. Ready. Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Okay, call the roll, please.
Board Member Conley?
Here.
Board Member Goodson? Board Member Goodson?
I am here.
Oh, good.
Board Member LaTulip? Here. Board Member Bynum?
Here.
Board Member Daly?
Okay, so next up is our consent items. Does anybody on the board wish to pull one of the three consent items? Is there any public comment on that matter? Come in by email or otherwise?
I did not receive any written communication.
Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. No, you make the motion. William will second it.
I'll second.
There we go. See how that flows? Call the roll, please.
Board Member Goodson?
Here.
Board Member LaTulip?
Aye.
Board Member Bynum?
Aye.
Board Member Daly? Board Chair Connolly?
All right, so we got through the consent agenda. Here, easy to do business with here. We're under regular business. Number 4, the board will receive a presentation on the status of the Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Paul Gosling. You need to mute your phone at home, please. Mute your phone because we hear everything going on there. Whatever.
All right, board members, thank you. So I'm going to walk through the status of the groundwater sustainability plan development. That's the reason why we're all here, why we formed this agency to get this plan done by January of 2022. So today's presentation, I'll be going over the status of the development, some of the upcoming steps. We're really at a pivotal time, and then receive direction from you as necessary. These are the sections that are required elements of the groundwater sustainability plan. There's administrative information, there's information in that, including descriptions of how the general plans fit into the groundwater sustainability plan element, as well as notice and communication, how we engage public stakeholders, and a variety of information. The basin setting information, which I'll speak about in a little bit, has been drafted. It's out for comment till September 8th. It's a public review draft. And the main piece that we're going to start to get into is the sustainable management criteria and descriptions of monitoring network and representative monitoring. A large piece of that work's been done, but there's more that needs to be done as we get into GSP completion steps. And then project management and actions, which I have a presentation on after the overview of the GSP status. So the overall timeline, we started in 2018 when we got the Proposition 1 grant on the basin setting project, and it is really the first phase of the GSP development. It's the scientific foundation of the plan and projects out groundwater conditions, projecting out into the future, taking into account growth, climate change, and other factors, including droughts. And we're completing that. It's out for a public review draft. Now we're switching to what we're calling the GSP completion project, and this will be the final phase. We really, and I'll walk through the timeline, we really have just about 1 year to get through this completion phase. We have to look about September-ish, about this time next year, to have it packaged out for public comment and allow sufficient time for the board to have hearings, provide staff changes and adjustments leading up to approval. Because we have to have it submitted in by January 30th of 2022. And then we're on to the final leg of GSP journey. And so once we submit it, and I really want to emphasize this, that's really not the end of the work. It's really just the start, because we have to take that plan, implement it. There'll be a lot of actions that we'll need to take. There'll be data gaps we'll need to fill. And so really, it's going to start a framework for long-term plan progression to sustain the basin for future generations. So really, where we're at now, we have a Proposition 1 grant. The county's administering it on behalf of the 3 subbasins, all the GSAs. And it's $1.5 million for the three GSPs. So far, us administering the grant, and this is just for the entirety of the 3 years, we'll be charging just our time to administer. We have to put in quarterly reports to get reimbursed and all the administrative aspects. We did have facilitation services through Consensus Building Institute to help us develop governance. DWR has come in and now has taken that on, is providing us the support through their own Proposition 1 funding, so we don't need to pay for that through the grant anymore. Data acquisition, we had the AEM, the helicopter survey, that was funded partially through the grant, and then partially there was a feasibility study that was terminated on PID Intertie project. And then the large share, the basin setting work, was with David's Engineering, and that contract ended on June 30th. Now we're into the final phase of GSP completion, and I'll walk through some of those tasks. There's multiple tasks. We contracted with Geosyntec, and they'll be carrying us through the work. Now there's a number of elements that we're going to be picking up and doing as staff. Some of them are things that we already have, like describing what the agency is. We can do that. We already have that. Describing what our ordinances are and working through project and management actions. Staff will be picking that up and doing that on our own accord. So the first phase, basin setting and other elements. Again, the public review draft is out for comment till September 8th. And that includes the hydrogeologic conceptual model, how we understand the basin actually operates, how water goes in, where it moves, groundwater conditions, both current and historical, but then also projecting out to the future under certain scenarios. So that really is going to lead us into whether we're going to, as we start looking at sustainable criteria, what we need to look for to avoid undesirable results to sustain the basin. Included is our water budgets and a description of the management areas. Again, we have 2 management areas in Wyandotte Creek. The sort of more non-rural Oroville area is going to be one management area, and then south of Oroville, the more rural area would be another management area. As we go through sustainable criteria, we're keeping this open. It may turn out we may not need different management areas if all the sustainable levels, the goals are the same, so it may not be necessary, but as a starting point, it's going to be good to have those discussions and dialogues with those communities specifically. Monitoring protocols and monitoring network. The monitoring network description is out as part of the package, as part of the review draft. And we did work on data and reporting standards. Those were pretty much a technical memo that came straight out of the regulations, and we're consistent with that. Again, one thing, and this is the process we're going to intend to use through the entire process, is as we complete drafts, and there'll be internal review with the management committee, we're going to put them out for a 30-day comment period. There'll be preliminary public comment periods. We're going to bring those back, evaluate those, and have some public workshops. And we did public workshops, a webinar on basin setting, and we recorded them. They're posted so people can view those at their leisure. But then after we get comments in, staff will review comments and prepare responses, and we'll present that to the board to describe what we put out, what the comments were, what changes we needed to make in other comments. Have you give us an opportunity on other questions and changes you may need to make to that. And then none of these chapters, even if we go after the public review and your review, are going to be final till we package the entire GSP up, bring that out for another public comment period, and bring it to you for your final deliberation action. Because it will be important as those pieces get put together there may be different things that will come up, but hopefully we'll address most of the issues through the public comment period. So now switching to the final phase of GSP completion, administrative information. This is just describing who we are, the agency, description of the plan area. A lot of this we already have written with maps, the notice and communication, how we're engaging the public, and our outreach. Interbasin coordination is another critical element we're spending a lot of time on, and rightfully so, because water doesn't stick to political boundaries. And so in Sigma, in the Act, it requires that one agency's sustainable criteria can't impede the achievement of the goals in an adjoining basin. So different basins are going to have different goals, but they can't be so incompatible that you're going to prevent someone from achieving their goals. So this really takes a lot of coordination. This is an effort that's in, I think, everyone's grant to cover this, but we also got, as part of our facilitation services from DWR, they also provided Consensus Building Institute a task to facilitate discussions with Wyandotte Creek and the surrounding subbasins on interbasin coordination. So that effort has started. We have the managers who are administering the grant and technical staff who brought in consultants to compare how they're determining interbasin groundwater flows, how the model's actually working, what different models as a starting point from a technical standpoint. And as we get through sustainable criteria, there'll be that collaborative interaction, so we'll know what each other's doing and avoid having one apples to apples on the scientific side, but then also be able to resolve significant differences that are going to impede how we achieve our goals. So this is going to be a lot more information will come out later in the year on that effort. Monitoring networks, representative monitoring is the choice of wells that we're going to use to demonstrate that how we're achieving our goals. So they have to be chosen and determined based upon the sustainable criteria we lay out. And then there'll be a whole assessment and improvement to the monitoring network that we'll present out. So, there's going to be data gaps both in monitoring and then also for streams and others that we'll bring out. I think, I don't know if we talked last time about technical support services, about additional well getting in. Bill offered out his property, have a well installed in Wyandotte Creek, a dedicated monitoring well that DWR is funding. So that's great news. We're going to try to leverage as much state support on their own, out of the program there. And then finally, developing the data management system on how we're going to describe and package up the enormous amount of data we have. So the final phase, completion, is sustainable management criteria. And this is really taking a look on where we're going to set the sustainability goals and our minimum thresholds to avoid impact to undesirable results to those who depend on groundwater. And it's starting with shallow domestic wells, ag wells, groundwater dependent ecosystems, which is another effort we're working on, identifying those, and depletion of interconnected streams. So all of those effects that could affect those who rely on groundwater, we need to take a look is, will the future hold that they're going to start having problems that are undesirable? And then where are we going to set the basin to avoid those undesirable results? And that's going to start this fall. Those analyses will have public discussions on that, a lot of interaction, direction from the board throughout the entire process, because it really needs to be driven from the public on what their views are on undesirable results and where they want to set the basin, because you have to link where you want to set the basin on your ability to get there. You just can't put a desire where you want the basin without the means to get there, because that's going to set you up for failure. And that's the link to project and management actions that will be worked on concurrently. And those could be everything from recharge projects, changes in groundwater demands and others, and I'll get into that more. And those projects are not going to be covered, the analysis and development of those not going to be covered by, are covered by the grant, but the implementation is going to have to be funded on their own. So timeline, from here on out, September 2020 to roughly April of 21, about 8 months, we're going to be in the development of sustainable management criteria, the monitoring network, interbasin coordination, and project management actions. So it'll be an iterative process on those sections. Public comment, direction from the board. We'll keep reports to the board. And it really is going to be a busy next eight months. And by April, we're hoping to have those things, each of those chapters, drafted up for public draft comment to put out for the public, and then we can respond to comments. And then April to September, we'll have those comments back on each of those chapter elements. We'll spend much of the summer packaging up the plan to respond to comments, to put the plan together in one cohesive package that then may raise some other issues as we start looking at the elements, putting the pieces together. And then roughly around September, we'll go out for the entire package, out for public comment, and then bring that back to the board, again, for you all to give direction and changes you may want to bring to the plan. And then finalizing the plan September to December. This is going to allow time for preparing the specific elements. There are other things that we need to put into the plan to submit into DWR that we need to package up, but then also have sufficient time for the board to hold hearings, get final comments through the process, and then probably plan on 2 to 3 meetings, hopefully October, but November, December, for you to consider. You may have issues we want to build in time. If you have issues for staff to go make changes to the plan before it's finalized, we want to build in sufficient time for you to do that during November, December. Not the best time of the year to do it, but we're hoping to get through that during that time of the year. And then, once January hits, hopefully we'll have the plan adopted. We'll still have maybe time for final adoption if there's other items, but then we'll need time to get the plan formatted for submission into the GSP portal. It's the way they set it up. We just don't put this document and send it off. They have a website where different elements have to go in, and it's its own animal, but we'll need to work through that and make sure we get in there and get it in by January 30th of 2022. So that's what's coming up. It's probably the most important, exciting time in the GSP development over the next 12 months. So open that up to any questions or thoughts.
Any questions or comments by anyone here? How about at home or on the phone? Any questions or comments? Well,
I'm good.
I guess to cut through all that, we're doing the outline, we're doing a framework. We're just getting ready to be able to have the science and then look at it and set the goals. So right now, all this is framework. This is paperwork. This is doing everything we're required to do. And then later, when we have our test wells and the data that you currently have would be augmented by new test wells, then we could come up with the actual goal setting.
Actually,
Are you going to use old science or new?
Well, we have to submit the plan and set the goals with what science we have now. And,
Okay.
And other basins.
I'm afraid it's not complete.
And the other critically overdrafted basins who had to submit their plan in by January of 20, a lot of them had far less data than we have. And they had to go with what best data they had. They may not have had any monitoring data or groundwater model. So we're going to have to build on what data we have, and we do have a pretty good data set, but there's obviously a lot more that we have. And that was the other point I was going to make, is what we submit in on January of 2022 is not the end. It's not going to be the final plan. It's going to be the
No.
plan as the data we have and the understanding that we have now. Every 5 years after we submit, we have to submit into the state an update on our plan on how we're achieving our performance goals, our interim targets to reach our sustainability level. We're also going to have the opportunity at those points to make adjustments to the plan as new data comes out, as we have a better understanding. So the plan will evolve as we get in, as we get more data. DWR has a grant proposal out that for complete, and it's going to come out later in the year, for GSPs that have been submitted, so we won't be eligible till 2022, grant opportunities for a minimum of $2 million and a maximum of $5 million for implementation. So that could be used for some of the project and management actions, for filling data gaps, and a lot of the things we identify. So really, January of 2022, what we submit is not going to be set in stone. It's going to be what we know and currently can rely on to best sustain the basin, and then we're going to continue that work, for the next 20 years till we reach sustainability.
Somebody's gonna do it for 20 years, not me. Okay, any questions or comments? I think we covered that. Number 5, presentation on a process to develop the projects. We go dig wells now?
What is that?
I wanna do some wells, man.
Yeah. Okay, the other pillar, one pillar thinking about there's a lot of pieces we have to put together, but the two main pillars, the sustainable management criteria. Staff will be working with Geosyntec, the consultant, on that process. And staff are going to be largely working through, at the same time, and it's going to be done in concert, project and management actions. What are we going to do to achieve those sustainability goals? And until they're done, it's really just, I had the wrong map up. Really just identifying those concepts and things we want to pursue. So I'm going to talk about the overview of the requirements, the process we're laying out to develop project management actions, and get direction from the board. So it is a required element. We do have to have included project management actions, and they'll comprise the effort to achieve the sustainability goals established in the GSP to avoid the undesirable results. So you can't have your goals set out without the means to get there. They can include regulatory and non-regulatory actions. The board as a GSA has pretty broad authority to take a number of actions that you deem necessary to achieve the goals, and that's actually language in the statute. Wyandotte Creek Board may accept projects or actions proposed by project proponents. So there may be people out there who might have a project to say, I'm going to come and I'm going to do a conservation program. There might be a water supplier who say, I'm going to do X, Y, Z and reduce the per capita demand over the next 20 years, and depending if they meet the criteria and the board accepts it, we could account for that. So it's an accounting of achieving your goals. But any of the project management actions have to meet the criteria and the regulations. So these requirements, and this is kind of wordy, but this is really what came directly out of the regulations. There has to be a timetable on the project management actions, and they have to really lay out when it's going to start, how long it's going to take to get done, the benefits that are expected, how much reduction in groundwater demand is going to be there. If it's recharge, how much recharge do we think is going to go in, and how it's going to be accomplished, like what's the water source, or how's the mechanism if you're going to do a conservation program, how's that's going to be achieved. And then legal authority is the agency. If it's the GSA, you can cite your authority, or if it's somebody else, what authority they have to do this. So they actually have to be responsible for doing it. And an estimate of the cost. And this is going to be real important because the cost benefit of the project is really going to have to be taken into account, especially as we go out for public comment, because these projects all of these are going to cost money. It's going to cost beneficial users to pay for these projects. In turn, the balance has to be that the benefit of sustainability, that certainty that as we go for the next 20 years through wet and dry cycles, and we're going to have more severe dry cycles, and climate change and growth, that we're going to have certainty about the sustainability of the basin for those who use it. What measurable objectives that you're going to be supporting, and really the ones we're going to probably be driving is groundwater levels and interconnected streams. Those will probably be the two main drivers that we have here. And then whether this project management action is going to achieve an interim milestone. And as I'll show, there's a chart. You have to indicate over every 5 years where you think you're going to be on your timeline to reach your projection. And that's going to be dependent upon when you estimate certain actions are going to come into play. And then regulatory and permitting requirements as they all understand. So none of these projects have to be implemented or fully shovel-ready by January 31st of 2022. They're on a 20-year implementation horizon. So if something looks pretty promising, pretty well fleshed out, but there may be funding issues or some other things that might take 5 years to implement and then be implemented over 8 years, that will be projected in and accounted for in your plan. The other thing in reviewing other plans, you do want to build in contingencies. You don't want to bank your achievement of your sustainability goals on a narrow set of what you think you're able to do over the next 20 years, because things may change. There may be other concepts that might be less fleshed out that may become actually more viable in year 5 or 10. Others, you may think that this is really where we're going to bank our achievement of our goals, and they may fall off. There may be changes, there may be loss of funding. So the last thing we want to do is to get into a situation when we're doing our reporting is having to go scramble to identify some replacement for a project we thought was going to happen with something. So it's much better to have a whole range matrix of options that we want to include in the plan. The other piece too is, as part of this, there needs to be some regulatory assurance that if any of these projects don't work out or get achieved, there is some regulatory backstop to achieve groundwater sustainability. That's something that DWR is going to look at, and maybe something, hopefully if we have a good slew of projects, and depending upon how out of balance the basin is, we may not need to achieve those. It may be something that we have as a placeholder out at year 15 down the line and never get there. But it's something that we should probably consider having as a contingency, because this is going to be, what we set out is going to be an enforceable regulatory target. So here's a chart that's commonly referred to, and this is for critically overdrafted basins, so we can add 2 years to all the time frames. So, the GSP adoption date, 2022, and the first interim milestone in year 5, which will be 2027. And this is, the minimum threshold is where you want to set, where you don't want to go below, because once you go below, you're starting to maybe create undesirable results. So it's something where you want the basin to operate above that during wet and dry years. So over time, as you project out, you need to identify where you think you're going to be on that that path towards that star, tied into what project and management actions you have. So a couple plans had a pretty good concept. What they had was project management actions with a matrix, and a lot of them had summaries of the projects with estimated benefit in acre feet to the basin, whether it's going to be adding water as recharge or reducing what comes out. And the higher level ones, the ones they're planning on doing, will be planned projects. And those are the ones that have a high expectation, they meet the requirements, look pretty good and on track to achieve sustainability by 2042. There was another grouping of potential projects, ones that maybe weren't totally fleshed out, maybe had some other issues, but all in all look pretty viable. And those were put into a category. And then others were conceptual ones that were probably not bad ideas. There was a lot of public support, but they were kept there almost as a placeholder. Those may be developed, let's say in year 10, they actually get implemented and things happen, and then we may want to account for those in the plan. So again, as the plan gets moving forward, it's going to evolve and change as circumstances change, as our understanding of the basin change, and as projects come and go. So an example, they ran through a table like this with the project name and type. Is it a conservation project, recharge project, recycling, new water supply if you bring in surface water, project like, good example, we got a grant to do a feasibility study with South Feather to bring surface water down to the Palermo area. That will, take domestic well users off of wells, put them on a surface water source. That could be accounted for as a project management action if that comes to fruition. Urban conservation, and then a regulatory one, pumping allocation. So then you start filling in, this matrix, and each one of these things will have a summary sheet, not very detailed, but enough to cover what's required in the plan. So to begin this work, we'd like to, have this presentation, develop a public workshop in November. We'll start working through some concepts. We'll build off of what the basin setting work looks like and where we're looking for undesirable results on how far we may be out of balance. Go out with some public workshop to develop some concepts from the public. There's probably a lot more that we'll hear from the public than we'll develop as staff. And this whole process is set up not to have consultants develop these project management actions or staff. Really, it has to come from the public about what the desires of the community is, what they're willing to have for sustainable levels, what they're willing to pay for and invest to get there. That's going to involve and really be dependent upon the public. We'll hopefully get a report to you in December on sort of a draft set of potential project and management actions, results from the workshop, some concepts, and then have some feedback from you on things you may like, things that we might have left off, and things you want us to go flesh out. At that point, we'll start developing a lot more analysis, some of the economic analysis, and more detailed analysis on benefits to the basin by January. And then, again, kick this back out to public workshop. It'll come up to staff, we'll evaluate that, and then get ready to come back, in the spring between April and June to hopefully get this element, again, out for a public review draft back to you for review, and then start getting it ready to get packaged up into the GSP. So that's sort of the path forward and elements of project management action, how it ties to sustainable criteria. So I'll open up to any questions or thoughts.
Any questions? Any questions on the phone?
I have none.
Thank you. All right. Moving on. Number 6. We need to restructure our advisory board.
Kelly, you on? Maybe not.
Kelly, can you hear us?
Good afternoon, this is Kelly Peterson from Butte County. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Great. So this item before you is really looking at the restructuring potentially of the JPA to reflect a more representative structure of what we have in place in terms of public engagement and stakeholder engagement. We've talked about this before, but as you know, Sigma really does set a high bar for engaging the public and stakeholders, and which represent all the beneficial uses and users of groundwater. And Paul just mentioned a second ago how, this really isn't the type of work that falls on the backs of staff, but it's really engaging the public and having them help us set those sustainable management criteria and, get a sense of what's acceptable for projects and management actions. So Originally, we had proposed a 7-member at-large advisory committee with 3 additional seats appointed by specific agencies, and so one was from Cal Water, one was from South Feather Water and Power, and the other was open for any tribal representatives that were interested. We do have those 3 appointed positions filled. However, we did not receive any applications for any of those at-large members. Basically, what we did for the basin setting rollout was we held a public technical webinar that was online, and we did get a decent turnout from folks there. So that is a potential option, but if we decide to, really just adapt to the fact that, people aren't interested in filling out an application to be on this advisory committee, I wanted to throw it out to the board to see if you have any direction and or thoughts on how to proceed.
Directions or thoughts, huh? I don't know how you make the public more aware, other than if you wrote an article that we're going to put meters on their wells, they'd fill this place to,
We thought about that.
But that's like, we don't know how or if we're out of balance yet. We may have a sustainable
Yeah.
operation going right now. We may not have to take any action other than maybe watch the future. But I got a feeling it's going to be in pretty good shape most places.
Yeah. So
So
one of the thoughts, and this is really about if you want to give us direction to explore modifying the JPA, because the JPA says that we shall form this advisory committee, and modifying that a little to give the agency the discretion to do what we've been doing is more public workshop, a broader public workshop like we did with the webinar, and balance that out, other than try to push that hill up, the rock up the hill, trying to form a committee. And we've done a lot of work, and frankly, even setting this committee up at this point will take a lot of administrative staff time to administer and everything else. And so
well, the bottom line is you don't have public interest in it, so we should just leave it, not make it mandatory, and just leave it open. If we get a great deal of interest, and we could modify it to bring it back. But right now, it's just not practical.
yeah, and if-
Form, is that what we're needing here?
Yeah, so if the direction is for us to go explore what language change, and it might be just changing the shall to a may, we can explore that with council and then bring back,
I'd say we keep it open, because there could be great interest, maybe not even in its next decade, but later.
Yeah.
And then they could bring that advisory committee back. But we can't make it mandatory because we can't fill it.
What have the other GSAs, what kind of success have they had? Vina and...
Vina had, well, I'll let Kelly, you want to cover Vina?
Speak really loud or she can't hear you.
Kelly, you want to cover Vina?
Sure thing. The VINA Stakeholder Advisory Committee is basically almost the same structure. It's a 7-member at-large committee with 3 appointed seats as well. There was really strong interest from that sub-basin in terms of participation. They meet on a monthly basis and for about 3 hours every month. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic up there in terms of interest. But that seems to be working pretty well up there.
Yeah, there were multiple candidates for all the positions, so the Vina GSA board had to make choices from all the candidate lists. So there was a different level of interest. The Butte Subbasin, because we did not form a JPA in the Butte Subbasin, so there were 11 independent GSAs. acting independently. But what we did to engage the public so they wouldn't have to run to 11 different agencies to figure out what's going on is we did form a Butte Basin Advisory Board, which is made up of one elected official from each of the 11 agencies as an advisory board. And that creates really the public face, so the public could go there, hear what's happening about the Butte Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan, and have at least a lead elected official interact with their partners, because we're all working to bring one plan. So a little different structure. Obviously have appointed elected officials who are there from boards, from the independent boards, but each of those independent agencies have their own board structure and maybe advisory committee on SIGNA.
All right, so he's looking for direction. His direction is change the words so they're not so harsh, and we can bring it back later. How's that?
Flexibility.
If needed, flexibility. Is that good with everybody? Do we need to vote on that or anything?
No, direction, then we'll work and bring something back.
Yeah, your somebody's speaker's on there at home. Okay. Financial reports. They were written, communications and reports. Is there anything that we need to look at here? Management committee update, Kelly? Number 9, management committee update, Kelly.
Yes. So the management committee has been meeting on a monthly basis as we are getting more busy and into GSP completion. There's not a whole lot from us other than Paul mentioned earlier, we did get approval on a new well installation through the TSS, which is the Technical Support Services program through DWR in the Wyandotte Creek subbasin. That'll be our first well, which is a nested well, which has the 3 different casings within the same well drilled area, so that we can look at different groundwater levels at different depths under the ground surface. So other than that, there are not any other management committee updates.
Any questions or comments by any of the board members?
No.
Or agency members here? Okay, so board recruitment update, Kelly, number 10. Good luck. We got Bill.
Sure, just real quick, I wanted to give you guys a quick update on our recruitment for board members. As you recall, we have 5 positions, each with a primary and an alternate position. We currently have 2 vacancies, one for the secondary or alternate agricultural stakeholder director, and one for the secondary alternate domestic stakeholder director. We have recently received a application from Rick Wilburn, and he has a very strong interest in groundwater. Also sits on the board for South Weather Water and Power, so we'll be moving that up to the Butte County Board of Supervisors for a potential appointment there. And other than that, we're still looking for any interested parties for the alternate agricultural domestic well user. Applications are found on the website. Pretty easy to get there, Wyandotte Creek GSA.com under governance, and then if you go to board members, there's an application there. And that's all.
All right. Well, it's a deep
Well,
subject.
I worked on Rick for 6 months, so looks like he's gonna come
Good
on.
job, Bill. Now it's your turn.
I need to start now if I need 6 months to get it done.
Yeah, you better get somebody in mind.
Okay.
All right. At this time, anyone from the public can comment on anything. It's not on the agenda. We can't take action, but you're more than welcome. Is there any?
Mr. Chairman,
any
I do
public-
have one thing I wanted to bring up. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. What we have, the first top cover sheet was the transmittal letter that's being used for agenda items. It's based on the county template. I understand it may have actually been adopted by the board for official use. The other one is a template based on the city of Oroville that, if we were to use that, would allow us to take advantage of the technology we have to auto-populate our agendas and greatly increase our efficiency in preparing the agendas. So, with no objection from the board, we would like to consider switching over to the city of Oroville-based template.
I don't know, is this an action item? It's not agendized.
No, it's not. And if it does need action, we'll bring it back as an actual item.
Oh, so you want to know if we'll consider it?
Yes.
I don't know why not. Is any objections from anyone? Anybody on the phone object? All right, well, why don't you bring that back next meeting, we'll approve it.
Thanks, sir.
All right. Now, public comment. Anybody emailing anything?
Mr. Chairperson, I did not receive any written communications for this meeting.
And there's nobody here that wants to speak, public comment? Any board member want to talk about anything? All right, let's adjourn the meeting.
I'm good.
Meeting over. Here we go.